The Jazz has finally rung the doorbell. And what I mean by that is Danny Ainge reached out to the New York Knicks finally again. And now they're back into negotiations for Donovan Mitchell. I know Stephen A. Smith came out over the week stating that the Knicks are going to have to trade R.J. Barrett and 5 first-round draft picks to land Donovan Mitchell. There is no way the Knicks are going to trade away their youngster, their top young player on this roster for Donovan Mitchell, especially when the Knicks have control of making this trade. They are in control because everybody knows Danny Ainge is trying to move on from Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell doesn't want to be there. He's the only decent player that team has now. And Donovan Mitchell is not a part of the Jazz future. There is no Miami. There is no Atlanta. There is no Phoenix right now. All those teams are over the salary cap, and all of them are trying to sign their own players. There's only one team right now that will have money room, space, and players and draft picks to make that trade, and that is the Knicks. And Donovan Mitchell, who's hanging out a lot in New York, he was with Fat Joe at Rucker Park the other day. He has been here a lot. He's been at Met games. Everybody spot him at Met games. Every time the Mets are playing at home, Donovan Mitchell's there. That tells you one thing. He wants to be here. He wants to play in New York. He wants to play at Madison Square Garden. The Knicks got to pull this trigger. Try to hold on to some of their youngsters like Grimes and Obi Toppin and Quigley. You don't have to move those guys. And if you do move one or two of those guys, make sure you pick the right ones. Quigley is a small guy. They already have Brunson there. If they bring Donovan Mitchell, he's 6'1", 6'2". You don't need Emmanuel Quigley. Even though he's good off the bench, you cannot keep Quigley. Then your guard play is very, very small. So I think Emmanuel Quigley should be a part of this trade, even though I have heard Donovan Mitchell really likes him. Obi Toppin, I would try to hold on to. If you're going to trade Grimes, and I don't want to trade Grimes, but if you're going to trade Grimes, make sure you don't give up 6 first-round draft picks then. This is going to be very important. This is going to be an important move for Leon Rose's career as a GM, as a basketball guru that we have seen as an agent, and hopefully maybe the transition of the New York Knicks for a winning organization if he can make a significant move like this.
I've had my skepticism in the past with Leon Rose just because he didn't have any general manager or executive experience being a player agent, but he's done a lot of good things so far in terms of not doing anything drastically like overpaying players like we saw with Phil Jackson or just making all these god-awful trades. Yeah, some of the draft picks ones were definitely questionable, but they had good intentions, and now the Knicks have the draft stock in order to make that kind of thing work. And so far, I like what he's doing here, trying to fall for, we're not going to get fleeced by this team. We're going to get fleeced by Danny Ainge. 6 first-round picks was not going to be a thing if another player was going to get thrown into the trade, especially not R.J. Barrett. If they make that trade, that is ludicrous. And for the fact that Stephen A. Smith and other people have said that's a realistic offer, that is fair? No, it's not. Nice try. It's not going to happen. And Leon Rose better not pull the trigger on that kind of thing. I've been one defending the fact that I want Obi Toppin to stay for a while too. If I were to do it, it would be Grimes, Quigley, and maybe 4 or 5 first-round picks. Fine, whatever. There's no individual player that's worth 6 first-round picks and R.J. Barrett at this point, because R.J. Barrett, I think, can be Donovan Mitchell in the future with his upside. Their skill set is very similar. Now, R.J. Barrett has to improve his shooting a little bit.
R.J.'s a better defender.
R.J.'s a better defender, absolutely. He's bigger, better rebounder, and I think there's other elements of his game that can grow, too. Yes, he's not the ball handler Donovan Mitchell is, not the guy that attacked the hoop, but he got better in those areas in the second half of the season when he actually got to play more and not have the ball hogged by Julius Randle all the time. So there's definitely some upside there. I do not want the Knicks to make this trade whatsoever, and it would be just like the old Knicks to pull the trigger on this kind of thing, and I hope it does not happen.
I don't think R.J. Barrett's going to be involved with this trade. Everything that I've read, it's either Grimes Quigley, Obi Toppin Quigley. That's what I've heard. Possibly, it was 6, but I think the Knicks are going to cut it down to 5, and Danny Ainge is going to have to settle with that because Donovan Mitchell don't want to be in Utah.
Right.
They don't want Donovan Mitchell in Utah, and nobody else can pull the trigger for Donovan Mitchell except maybe Toronto. And Toronto is not a place Donovan Mitchell wants to be. He has been hanging out a lot here in New York. You've been seeing him out with Brunson. You've been seeing him out with other Knick players. You've been seeing him out with Fat Joe and all these different hip-hop artists. He wants to be here. He wants to be in New York. He wants to be closer to his mom and his father. He grew up over here. He grew up a Met fan. His father works for the Mets. Why would he want to be all the way on the other side of the country playing for the Utah Jazz? It doesn't make sense. So I think this is going to happen probably in the next week. I believe by next week, Donovan Mitchell will be a New York Knick. It's just, there's got to be something that could match for this trade. I don't think it's going to be RJ. I think they're going to have to give multiple draft picks and maybe one of those combinations to land a Donovan Mitchell. But nevertheless, the Knicks land Donovan Mitchell. They still have Julius Randle. They still have RJ Barrett and Brunson. You're talking about one of the better front fives in the NBA. You really look at it. I'm not saying this because I'm a Knicks fan. Now, defensively, there's going to be a lot of questions there, because Julius Randle has played better defense over the last 2 years under Thibodeau. Donovan Mitchell was a defensive player coming out of Louisville, but he has really transitioned his game to an offensive style of ball. And then Brunson doesn't know what defense is. And then there's RJ, who's a very good defender, probably the best defender on this team, on this roster. So it's scary what this team's going to be defensively, but offensively, they're going to get enough points. They're going to be able to keep up with the better teams in the Eastern Conference, like the Celtics, the Cleveland Cavaliers, or Philadelphia 76ers. They'll be able to keep up with those teams. The question is, are they going to be able to defend those teams with the small guard play that they're going to have moving forward?
Yeah, and that's the other point, too, why the Knicks are really in control of this situation, and Danny Ainge has to realize that. Toronto is not going to be able to offer what you're comparing of what you want the Knicks to give up and be able to keep him, too. Because, remember, Toronto's not going to be able to confidently be able to re-sign him like the Knicks would be able to, because Donovan Mitchell wants to go there. So you're trying to package with Scotty Barnes and then a lot more than that, fine. But still, you have to be able to make sure Donovan Mitchell's going to go there, and Toronto's not a dumb front office that is going to want to do that at that level of a price with an unknown of that kind of thing. So Danny Ainge has to realize he's not going to be able to have as much leverage as he thinks down the road. So make the trade while it's still good. And
I think he will. I think it's going to happen. The question is when and how long it's going to be, because preseason starts in like 2-3 weeks. I think this move is going to have to happen more sooner than later, because Donovan Mitchell needs to get a little bit more comfortable in this defense, in this offense, and with some of the teammates that he's going to be playing with this year. So it's going to be very, very interesting moving forward with the New York Knicks. As far as the other news in the NBA, the James Dolan news has been a very interesting one. And there is stories coming out that James Dolan is planning to sell the team next year, the Knicks and the Rangers. Not Madison Square Garden. He plans to keep Madison Square Garden because it's the world's most famous arena with all the concerts that are going on over there. The question is whoever becomes the new owners of the Knicks and the Rangers, he's going to have to negotiate a deal with those owners when those teams play a home game on what kind of profits they make with the food and all the different merchandise and memorabilia. So it will be very interesting to see what James Dolan does moving forward going into next season. There is stories coming out that he's been in Vegas and he's been taking care of something over there. So it's not his number one priority to get rid of the New York Knicks or the New York Rangers. But when you see the price that you can get for the Knicks right now, which is I think $7 or $8 billion, and the Rangers you could probably get $2 billion, you're talking about $10 billion that you can make on just two investments. And you don't even have to give away Madison Square Garden or MSG TV. So you could still own the television channel. You could still own Madison Square Garden, and you're still bringing your money, and you made $10 billion off the Knicks and the Rangers, something that your father practically handed you to. So it's going to be very interesting what James Dolan does, but it's good news for the Knicks. It's also possibly good news for the Rangers. More for the Knicks. Definitely. Because none of these players, none of these free agents want to play for James Dolan. None of them do. So if they bring in a good owner and great ownership to New York, it's going to draw more free agents to want to play here if Donovan Mitchell's there and if RJ becomes a superstar and all the different young players the Knicks are going to have moving forward. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see what James Dolan does in the next couple of years.
As a guy that's a fan of both teams, it's definitely going to help the Knicks a lot more than the Rangers, just with how fragile a lot of these NBA players are with the relationships with the front offices and relationships with other players and stuff like that. Because the Knicks, they've spent money, they brought in guys, but a lot of them have either been bad contracts or the team wasn't good enough at that time to make it work, or you have Phil Jackson's overpaid whatever the heck he did. The Rangers have had their share of getting good free agents too. They've had their misses in the past too, but the Rangers have always been a team that's done just as well when they have had a lot of money spent as a team like this year that, yeah, they have money spent, but they were mostly a younger team. They seem to be pretty even. They've just had playoff woes. They've been stably run, though. The Knicks have been pretty badly run, and now they're better run. Can they get somewhere is another question, but this is a good step in the right direction. And that, yeah, James Dolan what you were saying about Vegas is absolutely true. He's trying to invest in something called the Sphere right now. So once he gets that resolved, it seems like that's going to be the direction they're going. They're projecting about next year, maybe in 2024, but sometime during that
next couple of years.
Yeah, sometime during that 2023-2024 basketball/hockey season seems like to be the target date for that kind of thing. And you're right, they're not going to have to give away Madison Square Garden itself with all the concerts and all the
I
other
would
events.
never do that.
And there's no reason for them to ever think to do that, because you're also going to get a better investment in terms of just modern money too. When he initially bought the Knicks, is going to be about double of what it is now, including what the revenue is already.
Triple. I think his father bought the Knicks at $500 million, and now the Knicks are worth $8 billion.
That's an insane value for what you're already getting still with the team and with everything that could come with it, with the team merchandise and stuff like that, and with the revenue they're going to get from the games too.
It's going to be very interesting with the New York Knicks and what they do moving forward as far as ownership is concerned, and the Rangers. The Kevin Durant sweepstakes is really died down, but there are stories that the Lakers are now in the mix for Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Reading, which would send Anthony Davis possibly to the Celtics. This is a 3-team possible trade avenue where the Brooklyn Nets, the LA Lakers, and the Boston Celtics, all 3 teams get the players that they want and move maybe some picks here and there. I've been reading that it would send Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant to the Lakers. And the Lakers and the Celtics would give up, I think, 5 first-round draft picks. The Nets would take on Russell Westbrook's contract for a year. Anthony Davis would go to the Celtics. I think Jaylen Brown would go to the Nets.
Right.
Marcus Smart would also go to the Nets as well. The Nets would do this because they're getting a boatload of draft picks. That's what I heard. But there's no sure thing. This is just a rumor right now. But could you imagine Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and LeBron James playing on the Lakers? What a powerhouse that would be.
The Lakers would do well in that scenario. The Nets, I think, would do well. I don't know why it would make sense for the Celtics. They risk a lot if you're trading away Marcus Smart and draft picks and Jaylen Brown for.
They would bring Anthony Davis and somebody else.
Okay.
I think it's somebody else.
All right. I guess it depends on what the other piece.
It's not just Anthony Davis.
It'd be a big risk because of Anthony Davis's injuries, though, if they were to do that. So,
but they need that powerhouse power forward they've been looking for a long time, and he's a young power forward. If he could stay healthy, Anthony Davis and Jason Tatum, how many teams in the Eastern Conference are going to be able to beat that?
No, that's true. If he does stay healthy, he's a top 10 player in the league.
Top 5.
Yeah. It's just, again, it's a big if right now the way he's been the last 2 years, so we'll see.
I've been hearing that Anthony Davis would want to move back to the East Coast. He wanted to play for the Knicks. The Celtics were one of the teams that he was interested in when he wanted to be traded, if you guys remember. So there's so many different things that could happen. It's got to make sense. And Kevin Durant don't want to be there. Kyrie Irving doesn't want to be there. Something has to happen. Something needs to break here. And it doesn't seem like it's going to break anytime soon. And that's the problem right here with Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant is demanding his way out. He just got a 4-year, $193 million contract. How does this make sense for the Brooklyn Nets to just part ways with him when they agreed to re-sign him? So it's got to work for the Brooklyn Nets. Out of all the teams, this has to work out for the Brooklyn Nets, because if it doesn't, this can set the Brooklyn Nets back again a significant amount of years. I'm talking about 8 or 9 years if they don't get 1 or 2 big pieces and picks to move forward in rebuilding this team with Sean Marks.
This might be the best way to do it, too. Getting another team involved always helps in terms of getting those draft picks that you just lost forever. And you have no first-round pick outside of pick swaps for the next decade. So, yeah, this is the best approach to do that. The Celtics, they have a good team. They don't need the draft picks as much, so they'd be willing to trade that kind of thing. The Lakers, again, they're kind of in a tough hole like the Nets are and trying to keep LeBron happy. And this will be one way to do it. Get Kyrie Irving back for sure.